Welcome everyone to the 100-day project, day 10. I cannot believe it's day 10. This is the last day of acrylic ink. And today I was just going to make a mess and see what happened. So I just started with a couple of shades of blue that were very close to each other and made some dots, thinking I'd make a background and pull something out and then watch this figure show up from the very beginning. There it is, right there. And I was wondering when one of these magical sort of figures might show up. So when I paint intuitively like this, I will often get these winged creatures that show up. Are they fairies? Are they angels? Are they somewhere in between? I have no idea, but they show up very regularly in my work. And I love them. So I was like, okay, I'm sure this is not the last time that inks will make an appearance in the series. But my intention when I sat down today was just to do what I love to do with inks, which is watch them move. And so this was a super fun example of that. The two blues that I used were Processed Cyan by Rowney, and then the Sennelier Cobalt Blue Hue. So those were the blues. I added a little bit of white, thinking that it would make some blooms, which it did. And then to give it some contrast, I added some indigo, Rowney Indigo, which looks very black here, but is actually a very dark blue. And you can see here when I add some water to it and pull it out, it's almost got like a purpley undertone. I also pull in some Purple Lake and some dark green, which is the Phthalo green by Rowney, a little bit in the end. And I really love purple and green next to each other. So at the very end, I pull in a little bit of brilliant yellow, Rowney, just to warm it up a little bit. There's some bright light in here, and I just wanted to give it a little bit of a glow. It also helps make that purple really shine. So at this point, my figure's there. I'm just playing with values and darkening things. There's a delicate dance at this stage because it's very wet. So you'll notice I can lift fairly easily, even though it's ink, acrylic ink, and even though it's going to dry permanent, while it's really wet like this, you can lift it like you do watercolor. So there's a delicate dance here between letting areas dry, pulling out what I want, adding more color, letting it bleed in some places, and giving it time to dry where I don't want it to bleed. So here's that dark phthalo green where I'm just adding some dots because I know what I want to do. I want to make kind of a neutral color. And I haven't decided that I'm bringing in the yellow yet. So this is the phthalo green, some white, and some of that Purple Lake. And I know that's going to make a dulled down grayish purple. And I'm doing this kind of Rembrandt lighting where it's darker on one side and lighter on the other. So where the figure is lightest, I'm making it dark, and where the figure is darkest, I'm making it light. So to play dark against light, against dark against light to help make the light shine and the contrast really show up. And I debated on whether or not I wanted to make this a slightly different color or to make it even darker would have been even more dramatic, but I'm tired. It's been, I've said this the last couple of days, it's been a busy end of the week, or I guess, end of the week last week, start of the week this week. So I'm just kind of going with it. So here is, I added a little bit more green, and you can just see when you add the green, the purples just really pop out, and I really love that. It also enters in, even though this has been a cool down neutral kind of green, it also brings in a little bit of the warmth that I'm going to bring in with the yellow here in a little bit. You'll notice I also brought out my flat brush, and I love to do the backgrounds with the flat brush. The round brush holds a lot of liquid, and if I'm doing a background with a round brush, I might end up with more liquid than I want. And that might get some of that wet paint in the figure to bleed more than I want it to. So I like to use a flat brush in the background. You can also get some interesting brush strokes that way, and I like that. So that's something that is fun to do. I've brought in that phthalo green in the background. That means I need to add it to my figure to harmonize my colors. Where you put one color, you want to put it in more than one place. So I'm taking a look at that, lightening up that face a little bit more. I don't love that the face is pretty much smack dab center in the middle of the piece. Normally I like those sorts of focal points to be off center, but this is where it showed up. So this is where it is. I'm not going to fight it or try and change it at this point. It is what it is. But I'm adding in a little bit of that. When you see me motion to my wrist like that, that means I'm letting things dry. So I pause the recording, give it a bit of a fan, and let it dry. I love when the edges drip like that, so I'm just adding a little bit of drip to the bottom part of that wing shape. Also creates a bit of a vertical line there, which I'm liking. And again, just adjusting values. So bringing more of that purple and adding a little bit more of the indigo in that shading to darken it up a bit. I don't love how bright that upper part of that wing is. Right now, that's my focal point. That's where the broadest or biggest contrast is. And I don't love that because I want to bring more attention to the figure itself. So I'm going to layer in some ink over that white and blue area here in a bit to darken it. Not darken it too much, but enough to play down that high contrast. And I'm being very careful because I added that darker area around the outside portion, and I don't want that to bleed into that area. And I add in a little bit more white into that face, but I need to let it dry so it can build. And here I'm adding some yellow to warm it up a little bit and just create that contrast between the warm light and the cool violet and purple, even though the violet's a little bit warmer. It makes some of that blue slightly greenish, which ties into the background a little bit. And it's not hugely noticeable, but just enough to give a little sense of warmth, which is what I'm going for. And adding more white, I want that face element to be more contrast than that wing shape. And so I'm making that brighter and making the wing darker. And as I mentioned before, this is the dance of painting. We make one thing darker, one thing lighter, adjust, let it dry, adjust, let it dry. And it's just the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And we're almost to the end in another one of these fantastical figures. Always checking, do I want to add more? That's me deciding if I want to add yellow in the background or not. And there we go. There he is. Thanks so much for joining me. We're on to watercolor next. I hope you're doing well, and take care. Bye.